Welcome to Award Daily Drive, where golf gets the clarity, strategy, and humor it deserves. I'm Alieve Wenger, your host, and today we're diving into Rule 16.3 of the Rules of Golf. Yes, the embedded ball rule. Now, this might seem like one of those small print rules, but trust me, whether you're battling it out on a championship course or your local muni, it's one you'll want to understand. And to help us break it all down, I've got the brilliant Judge here with us. Judge, let's start with the basics. Let me step into the mindset of a brand new golfer, wide-eyed and eager, but with zero experience. I've just set foot on a golf course for the first time. It's beautiful, but I have no idea where to start. So here's what's swirling in my mind. First, what's the absolute basics of the rules I should know before hitting my first shot? Like, how do I even know where I'm supposed to aim or where I can and can't walk on the course? Also, this whole idea of keeping score. How do I know if I'm doing well or just, surviving out there? And one more thing. What are some common beginner mistakes when it comes to the rules, like things I might not even realize are penalties? I just want to make sure I'm not accidentally doing something wrong and slowing everyone else down.
For the absolute basics, focus on knowing where to tee off, aiming for the fairway and green, and keeping safety in mind. Stay off greens unless you're putting, and avoid bunkers unless your ball is there. Par is the number of strokes an expert golfer is expected to take on a hole. As a beginner, focus on enjoying the game rather than your score. Common beginner mistakes include not knowing penalty areas like water hazards and accidentally grounding your club in bunkers. Just be mindful of your surroundings and don't hesitate to ask for help. Enjoy the journey.
That's such a helpful breakdown, Judge. So as a beginner, I'd focus on starting from the tee box, putting. And it's comforting to hear that the score isn't as important as enjoying the process. Now, you mentioned penalty areas and grounding the club in bunkers. Could you explain a bit more about those? For example, how do I recognize a penalty area? And what's the proper way to play out of a bunker without breaking any rules? That seems like something I'd easily mess up without realizing.
Sure thing. A penalty area is usually marked with yellow or red stakes or lines. It's often a water hazard or a difficult area from which to play. If your ball lands in a penalty area, you can take a penalty stroke and drop outside of it, or try to play it as it lies. For bunkers, the main thing is you can't ground your club, meaning you can't let it touch the sand before your actual swing. Just gently hover your club above the sand and swing away. It's all about being mindful and taking your time.
So penalty areas are marked with red or yellow stakes or lines, and I have the choice to take a penalty stroke and drop outside the area or go for it as it lies. And for bunkers, key is not grounding my club, just hovering it above the sand until the swing. That makes sense now. What about if I accidentally move the ball when I'm addressing it, like it rolls off the tee or shifts in the sand? Is that a penalty or is there some leniency for beginners like me who might be a bit clumsy?
If the ball falls off the tee before your swing, there's no penalty. Just re-tee it. But if you accidentally cause the ball to move in a bunker or anywhere else, there's generally a one-stroke penalty unless it was clearly accidental and unintentional. Don't worry though, everyone has those moments. Just do your best and have fun learning.
That's a relief to hear. So no penalty if it falls off the tee before I swing, and even if I accidentally move it elsewhere, I just add a stroke and keep going. Got it. Thanks, Judge, for making it all feel so approachable. Any final words of wisdom for someone like me, just stepping into the game, trying not to feel overwhelmed by all these rules?
Absolutely. Remember, golf is about enjoying the journey. Focus on the basics, take it one step at a time, and have fun out there. You'll pick up the rules naturally as you play more. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Every golfer started where you are now. Enjoy the game.
That's such a reassuring perspective. Can you walk us through what Rule 16.3 covers and why it's such an important rule for every golfer to know?
Absolutely. Rule 16.3 covers the embedded ball rule, which allows you to lift, clean, and drop your ball without penalty if it's embedded in its own pitch mark in the general area. It's important because it helps maintain fair play, especially in tough conditions. So knowing when and how to apply it can save you strokes and keep your game on track.
That's a great breakdown, Judge. So just to clarify for our listeners, when you say embedded in its own pitch mark, we're talking about the ball actually being stuck in the ground, not just sitting in soft turf, right? Could you also explain how the general area is defined so everyone knows where this rule applies?
Exactly. For a ball to be considered embedded, it must be stuck in its own pitch mark in the ground, not just resting on soft turf. The general area includes the entire course except for the teeing area and putting green of the hole you're playing, all penalty areas and bunkers. So if your ball is embedded in the fairway, rough, or any other part of that general area, you can take release.
Got it. So basically, if it's anywhere in that general area and genuinely stuck in its own pitch mark, you're good to take relief. Now, Judge, are there any common scenarios or exceptions where players might think they can use this rule but actually can't? It sounds like there could be some sneaky situations that catch people off guard.
Exactly. Understanding the nuances can really save you from a penalty.
Absolutely. So, Judge, what are some of those nuanced situations where this rule doesn't apply? Maybe a spot where golfers often get tripped up thinking they can take relief, but end up in a tricky spot instead.
One common situation is when the ball is embedded in sand in an area that's not closely mown, like rough or a bunker. Another is if the ball is embedded on the fringe of a putting green. It's not considered part of the general area. Also, if the ball embeds in its own pitch mark, but is on a steep slope or an unnatural surface like a cart path, you can't take relief under this rule. These are the spots where golfers often get tripped up.
Those are the kinds of details that can catch anyone by surprise. So if it's sand in the rough, on the fringe of the green, or anything unnatural like a cart path, this rule doesn't apply. Got it. For our everyday golfers, what's the best way to make sure they're getting these calls right during a casual round? Any quick tips to avoid those common pitfalls?
Sure, always assess the lie carefully, and when in doubt, consult the rulebook or a fellow player. It's always better to double check.
Great advice. Taking a moment to assess and consult can really save you from a heated, friendly debate on the course. Thanks for that, Judge. Speaking of tricky rulings, have you seen any memorable tournament moments where this rule really came into play and made a big impact?
Absolutely. One memorable moment was during the Farmers Insurance Open. Patrick Reed's ball landed in the rough on the 10th hole. Reed believed it was embedded, and he picked it up before calling a rules official to confirm. The official inspected the spot and agreed that the ball was embedded, allowing Reed to take relief without penalty. The situation sparked debate because some questioned whether the ball was actually embedded and if Reed should have waited for an official before lifting the ball. In that scenario, the proper procedure would involve first assessing the ball's condition without touching it. If a player suspects the ball is embedded, they should call a rules official to confirm before lifting it. If an official isn't immediately available, the player can mark the ball's position and carefully lift it to check if it's embedded, but they must inform their playing partner or an official before doing so. If the ball is indeed embedded, relief can be taken. If not, the ball should be replaced without penalty. Proper communication and following the rules ensure fairness and transparency in such situations, which highlighted how crucial knowing this rule can be in a tournament. It definitely impacted his strategy and showcased the importance of understanding these nuances.
That's such a great example. It really shows how knowing the rule not only saves you strokes, but can shift your whole strategy in critical moments. Do you think pros actively practice these rulings during their prep? Or is it more about having the right rules, officials, and caddies to consult with during a tournament?
Pros definitely familiarize themselves with key rulings, especially those that can impact their game. However, they also rely heavily on caddies and rules officials for guidance during tournaments. It's a combination of preparation and having a strong support system.
That makes perfect sense. Knowing the basics themselves, but also trusting their team to step in when needed. For our listeners, it's a good reminder that even the pros lean on their resources. Speaking of preparation, any advice for amateur players to brush up on rules like this before hitting the course?
Absolutely. Amateur players can benefit from reading the official rules of golf or using a rules app. Practicing specific scenarios on the course can also help. And of course, don't hesitate to ask more experienced golfers or club officials if you're unsure.
Solid advice. Practicing scenarios and using tools like a rules app really make it easier to stay sharp. Plus, asking experienced golfers can spark great conversations too. Before we wrap, Judge, Any final tips for golfers to confidently handle an embedded ball situation during their rounds?
Sure. Always take a moment to assess the situation calmly. Familiarize yourself with the rules beforehand, and when in doubt, ask for guidance. Confidence comes from knowledge and experience.
That's such a great way to put it. Knowledge and experience really do breed confidence. Thanks for sharing such practical insights, Judge. This has been such an engaging dive into Rule 16.3. I'm sure our listeners will walk away ready to tackle any embedded ball situation like a pro. Judge, let's talk timing first. When a golfer approaches their ball, how much time do they have to make decisions, like whether to take relief under Rule 16.3 or assess other options? Pace of play is such a big focus these days, so I'm curious how this plays into it. And while we're on the subject, can you also explain the proper procedure for dropping the ball under the current regulations? There's always some confusion about how and where to drop it, so a quick walkthrough would be great for our listeners.
Sure thing. Typically, a golfer should make a decision within 40 seconds to keep pace of play. For dropping under Rule 16.3, you first find the nearest point of complete relief, no closer to the hole. Then, drop the ball from knee height within 1 club length of that spot. The ball must land in and come to rest in the relief area.
That's super clear. Thank you, Judge. So, golfers should aim to decide within 40 seconds to stay on pace. And when dropping under Rule 16.3, the key is finding the nearest point of relief, dropping from knee height, and ensuring the ball stays within that 1 club length relief area. For our weekend players, what would you say is the most common mistake people make with their drops? And how can they make sure they're following the procedure correctly?
A common mistake is not dropping from knee height or not measuring the relief area accurately. To avoid this, always measure the club length carefully and ensure you're dropping from the correct height. Practicing these steps can help make it second nature.
That's a great point. Getting those basics right, like knee height and accurate measurements, can prevent a lot of unnecessary penalties. Practicing it beforehand really does make a difference. Thanks for breaking it down, Judge. Any final thoughts or tips before we bring this episode to a close?
You're welcome. My final tip is to stay patient and enjoy the process of learning the rules. It can really enhance your game.
Perfectly said. Patience and learning go hand in hand, especially in golf. Thank you, Judge, for sharing your expertise and making Rule 16.3 feel approachable for all golfers. And to our listeners, remember, knowing the rules isn't just about penalties. It's about playing smarter and having more fun. Until next time, keep your head down, your pace up, and your game strong. Of course. All right, that wraps up another episode of Award Daily Drive. Judge, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and breaking everything down for us. It's been incredibly helpful and inspiring, especially for all the new golfers out there. And to our listeners, remember, whether you're figuring out the embedded ball rule or just learning how to tee it up, the key is patience, curiosity, and enjoying every swing along the way. Until next time, keep your head in the game, your pace steady, and your love for golf alive. Thanks for joining us on Award Daily Drive. See you next time.